Good morning. Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025 here in House Transportation, which we've learned in the last 24 hours is full of artists and wannabe artists. This morning, we are going to get a introduction walkthrough from our legislative council on the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill that has come over from the Senate, S-123, and it's 57 pages. So we will go for as long as we can until I see enough feedback that says we'll take a break, and then we'll do that, and we'll come back and keep plowing through it so that we will know everything that's in the bill. Then we head to the education from Department of Motor Vehicle over the next few weeks so that we are prepared to then take testimony and work through the bill and see what other additions we want to make to it. So as I see the screens going the way they are, good morning, Damien, and welcome back to committee as a frequent flyer, and I'm handing it over to you. It's all yours.
Great, thank you. Morning, everyone. For the record, I'm Damien Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel, and share my screen here. We're off to a good start if I remember to share my screen before I start testifying. So what you have in front of you is the miscellaneous motor vehicle bills, or motor vehicle bill. It is a short 57 pages. We should be done in 5-10 minutes tops, so don't worry. The first section here, did I not do that? I thought I did. Maybe I stopped the sharing. There we go. Great. All right. So anyway, the first section here, this is just amending the definition of pleasure car to clarify that it includes all plug-in electric vehicles. So both all electric or battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. The second change is to the veterans designation language. You're going to see this throughout. There are going to be these long sections where there are very few changes. The key one here is that we're saying a new application, not a renewal application, shall be accompanied by all of the documentation that is required to get a license in the state. So if you remember, when you go to renew your application, you don't have to provide documentation like your birth certificate or your passport and things like that to renew. And so it's the same here for an individual with veterans designation. This is just a clarifying technical change. And that is going to be a lot of this bill. So the rest here, what you can see is I've just been renumbering to break this out, because otherwise it was a paragraph that took up the better part of a page. So just trying to make it a little easier to read the different requirements that were buried in there. The next is anatomical gifts, so organ donor designation. Right now you can do this with your driver's license. This clarifies that you can also do it with a non-driver ID. So the big change here is the addition of N at the bottom of page 3, going on to page 4. And this matches the language that we currently have for driver's licenses. So the other changes in there were just replacing gendered language. So, let's see, disability placards for volunteer drivers. So you're all familiar with the disability placards that hang from a mirror. The law says that a volunteer driver, someone who's driving an individual with a disability around, their placard is supposed to say volunteer driver. That's never happened. So we're changing the law to reflect that we don't actually do that. So this is one of those instances where probably when we enacted the law, it seemed like a simple thing. And for whatever reason, it got overlooked, or it wasn't that simple to implement. And now years later, DMV is looking at things and saying, hey, that doesn't line up with our practice. Let's fix the law. So this is a fairly normal technical change here. And where is the actual change? There it is, all the way down on page 6. just again, giving you a sense of, we're doing a lot of little technical changes in here where I'm just correcting language to match our current drafting format. And otherwise just doing that. Yes.
So, I'm aware of the volunteer drivers that work for public transit.
Mhm.
And so they've always had this, it's always been allowed that they would have these. We've never issued them.
We've never issued them placards that say volunteer driver. They've gotten just standard
Okay,
disabled placards.
so then are they gonna now say volunteer driver, or they're just gonna be regular plaques?
They're just going to continue getting the regular placards. Yeah, sorry, I may have confused that. But yeah, so this is just allowing the existing practice to continue and to be in alignment with the law. So, or to bring the law into alignment with existing practice. So this is, yeah, this is a good example of an instance where we added some details in the law when it was enacted. They don't actually affect the substance of the law that you need to have a placard in order to park in certain locations, et cetera, and that there's a process for getting that placard. What it affects is that just the department has never had two sets of placards, one that says volunteer driver and one that doesn't. They've just had the standard disabled placards, and this allows them to continue that practice. Okay. All right. So I'm going to skip over the next couple pages. It's a lot of changing his or her to the commissioner or the individual. And then that brings us into fees. So there's going to be, again, a couple of repetitions here throughout the fees. Like I said yesterday, I hope everybody had their coffee this morning, got snacks to keep your blood sugar up, because a lot of this bill is very repetitive. So in here, I've broken out the long paragraph into subparagraphs. And then the main change here is that this is for the non-driver IDs. There's a fee of $29 when you apply for the card, except that an initial card shall be issued at no charge to an individual. Current law says an individual who surrenders their license in connection with a suspension or revocation. And this is a suspension or revocation due to a physical or mental condition that means they can no longer drive. So at that point, they can trade out their driver's license or operator's license for a free ID card. And then this will add a free ID card for individuals who are under 23 years of age and transitioning out of the state's foster care system. So that's the translation of the language in B there. This was requested by DCF. Currently, they are paying, this is money that DCF is paying to DMV, and it creates a bit of an administrative headache over there. So this is simplifying the administration, and it is a loss of revenue for DMV, but it's money that the state was paying to itself. So, and Logan can walk you through the actual dollar amounts too. I don't think it's a very large dollar amount, if I remember right. The next is a fee waiver for state, municipal, fire department, and rescue or emergency medical organization motor vehicles, as well as county vehicles. So this waives the EV infrastructure fee for vehicles that are owned by the state, counties, municipalities, or volunteer fire or ambulance or other emergency medical organizations like that. Right now, there aren't a lot of electric fire trucks, but this is anticipating that if and when those do arrive on the scene, that they'll be eligible for a waiver of the fee if the fee is still in place.
Representative Case?
I do think Power Wheels makes one.
Oh, an electric fire.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my little nephew was driving one. Pass that on, you guys.
Representative Howe?
Yeah, do we know who brought this forward? I mean, because the infrastructure fee, will go to just plug-in hybrids.
Yeah.
If things pass the way we think they will.
Yeah, this,
And, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Do the non-plug-in hybrid, town or fire trucks not pay a registration fee?
yeah, this is part of a larger section that waives registration fees and other fees or reduces them for various entities. So I can pull that section up if that would be helpful.
Well, so my question is, do fire trucks pay registration fees now?
Let me pull up the
Okay.
language so that I'm sure. Is it switching with me? Great.
We take phone a friends at any time as well.
Yeah, and then
Is
this,
any clarifying information that you know or comment, or we do also take phone a friends at any time?
So this is just,
As long after you identify yourself.
David Collier, Commissioner DMV. I know David's want the exact language on it. I know we do have a reduced fee. He's want the exact language here. That municipalities don't pay on the registration side, so we was trying to mirror that they already have that.
Yeah.
Discount, and we're adding in this EVP, which is kind of
Yeah,
subcategory, trying to just level the playing field on. I do have some numbers on that. I think currently there are 300 and. Sorry. Just over 300 state municipal electric vehicles right now. That are registered, so on it. I know every dollar counts, but that number's up.
and so up until this, they did pay it from January to today?
if they've registered any.
Yeah.
So here's the language for you. It's no registration fee for motor vehicles owned by the state. It's $15 for municipalities and fire departments. And then replacement registration plate for $11. So they're reduced fees here. And then federally funded vehicles are $14 in lieu of the fees otherwise charged. And then this is adding the waiver of the EV infrastructure fee in there. So that's the existing language. Logan has a breakdown on the fees that came with the fiscal note for the as passed Senate version. One other thing you asked where this came from. So it did come from the DMV. There is a handy chart that it should be on the committee's webpage at this point that I sent to Cam last night that has a breakdown section by section of who proposed the language.
Okay, yeah.
And whether it was changed by the Senate. And if it was changed by the Senate, which committee advocated for the change, because the Senate Finance pulled or changed some language in the bill. So that is up there. So you'll be able to see who asked for what and where the language came from. It also provides a section by section summary so that if you lose focus and start thinking about the sunshine outside during this walkthrough, you can go back and you'll be able to find out what every section does. So.
You know me all too well. No. I'm also thinking is like we would take the percentage what they pay now at that $14, and implement that for the EV. Instead of just waiting, do the same percentage that they have to pay for registration. It's food for thought.
They get a discount on the current ones,
That's what I'm saying. Just keep that same
Keep the discount
discount for the EV. Yeah.
rather than being completely.
Correct. Yeah. If we wanted to keep it like it is. Yeah.
Yeah, they pay like 14%.
Yeah.
Currently, or something like that.
And then it might be a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
For, managing it and stuff.
Yeah.
But Yeah, we do have another section that I'm about to get to where the fee was mirrored to the current discount for another program. And so it's the same rate, not the same amount, the same percentage rather than the same rate as that. Yep.
So when you brought up the other language, it specifically referenced $14. And
Yeah.
this other section we just went by mentioned $29. And then this fee says $11. They're all set that way. None of them have any inflation review, et cetera. And they only can be raised then by a bill that, like we did 2 years ago,
Yep.
can be raised. Is it not an option to put any escalator or review that would force an annual activity that didn't require a bill and an activity every 2 years? Is there?
It
We didn't have
is,
inflation for how, the
Yeah.
idea that there was no inflation since, whatever, Jimmy Carter or some, whatever, 1970s, and there hasn't been as high as it is since the early 80s. So we got into the habit of not even considering it. And now we're in this world the way it is now. What are some of the options on a bigger picture? I'm not referencing or suggesting that we're not doing the DCF we're just using it as an example. I'm not advocating electric vehicles or the DCF change. Talking about fees that are referenced in the statute. Has to be a fee bill, or is there anything we can do moving forward that requires some level of review?
so you do have the option to put in an escalator for the fees. It gets challenging for people to keep track of what it is. And it would mean that each year you'd have to have probably a few months in advance of the new year. So the way we do it for minimum wage, for example, is in the fall, the Department of Labor looks at the CPI from September, going back a year, the change in the CPI for that September. And then in November of that year, based on that CPI info, once it comes in, they attach that inflator to the minimum wage and they announce it so that all of the businesses who are paying minimum wage can update their payroll in time for the new year when the minimum wage takes effect. And so with these, you could do something similar to that, but it would require a person at DMV to go through all of the fees in here and to then attach the inflator, and you'll end up with some fees that end up being kind of funny, 1536 1 year and then 1562, which is, in the day and age of credit cards, it's not a huge deal, but so that is an option. The reason why historically we've done fee bills is because the legislature, there have been arguments about both the chance to take a look at fees and see if they're reasonable for the service being provided and whether it gives you a chance to sort of review what's in there and what people are paying fees for, and to also review the amount you're raising it by. The other argument for it has been accountability, so that if there is a fee increase, like a tax increase, folks have to be able to go back to the voters and say, yes, we did that. That said, there have been in recent years other areas where we've taken surcharges and fees and attached them to set them so that they're sort of automatic. The good example is on workers' compensation insurance. There's a surcharge on the premium that funds the workers' compensation program at Department of Labor. That used to be something where we had to go to Ways and Means every single year and finance every single year. In many years, that would get caught up in another bill that was controversial, and it would be held hostage. And that funding, if there was no bill, the funding would expire and the entire program would basically have to be shut down with all of the employees laid off. And so that became sort of a political football. And so we set that to an automatic rate, in large part too, because that is a rate that changes almost never. And when it does, it's usually by 0.1%. So we're not talking about a huge swing, but it certainly is an option. It would be a big bill
Sounds
to
good.
do it.
When the fees were raised the last time, did you have to go back into each one of these sections of that? Was that 20% lower?
Something like that. I'd have to look at the fee bill, but yeah, things were raised by roughly the same percentage and then everything was rounded off.
Do they go back in, do you have to go back into every one of these subsections? So that 15 was likely 20% lower or some number.
Very likely, yeah.
But
It would be good to know whether these were, I don't remember us. I don't remember the details of like, was it like across the board, all DMV fees? I don't think so.
I don't
And
believe
I'd
so.
be
No,
curious
no.
to see if this actually did change.
So there's actually an easy way to tell. So this was changed in 2023 in the big bill. I don't know if that had the fee increases in it. And then last before that, it was 2015. So,
increases were rolled from the transportation bill over.
yeah, so this probably wasn't changed then.
Ways and means is a fee bill, yeah.
So it's ways and means, so yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the language there appears to have been in the big bill. And so unless the Ways and Means fee bill got rolled into that, and I wasn't working on it.
Very likely.
That was a political maneuver. Long story, but yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess when it comes time for a little bit of the testimony, just a few
Be nice to know.
minute of how you weren't here obviously, but how, Commissioner, what happens if there's a fee increase and what's the process? What kind of programming, what do you guys have to go through? Just to get a background of what happened and how it works, what we have to do to change things, and that shouldn't be very in-depth, but just what's the impact when we do something like that? What happens at the agency or the department?
so there's the fee increase the last time around. It went from 12 to 15.
So there is a full review of each
Yeah.
line of the
Yeah.
under chapters, as you would say, whatever you say, we work in certain chapters or certain areas, they would have to go through each of the whole chapter to find out every fee that's there.
But my recollection is they didn't do that. They just picked the higher ones, I think, to get to, I think it was like a total of 18 million. I don't think they did every single one. My recollection.
I could be wrong, I don't know,
Or maybe they changed, I don't know. My
They did.
You're saying that they did?
I don't know how many
Yeah.
they did. I know that I do know that there were quite a few here. But I'd have to go in and literally
Yeah.
go section by section to see what was actually amended. And yeah, probably not the best use of my time.
I'm not looking,
Yeah,
I'm not looking saying we're redoing the fees or not, I want to just understand what happens. And
Yeah.
if there is
Maybe
a
they did.
mechanism, or we do have to go back and if you want anything to change, what kind of the process there is. So I think we've done
Yeah.
my question of,
and
everything is set, and if you want it to change, it has to be, there's no automatic reviews of any, unless you specifically pass something to automatically review it.
yeah, it has changed a bit too with administrations and the willingness of the fifth floor to consider fee increases. So and that's really again a political thing where you end up with, if there's willingness to talk about them, fee increases are often discussed more often. Not to say that they're enacted, but they're reviewed more often. And if there is less willingness to do so, which there has been in the last 8 or 9 years, then it just doesn't come up very often. So, okay. Are we good with that section? All right, so there is in section 7, which is on page 10, this is an existing, we're amending an existing exemption for a very small subset of veterans. Right now, there are 3 veterans in the state who qualify for this fee waiver. This will potentially increase it, and I'll explain why. But what it is if you are a veteran who became disabled through your service and now require an adaptive or modified motor vehicle to get around because of that disability, you're eligible for financial assistance from the Department of Veterans Affairs to purchase that vehicle. And if you've received a vehicle through that assistance, you don't pay any registration fees for that vehicle or any vehicle that replaces it under state law. So currently this is 3 in the state. This would add the annual emissions fee, which is a $2 fee. And then the electric vehicle infrastructure fees to the extent that adaptive electric vehicles are available. And then the main change in here is our statute has always said that and you had to be an honorably discharged veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. The VA rules and the federal law say that in order to be eligible for this benefit, you have to have received a discharge under other than dishonorable conditions. And for an honorable discharge or a general discharge under honorable conditions, it's automatic. For anything below that, the VA goes through a review to determine if your discharge was under honorable conditions or not, or under other than dishonorable conditions or not. So there's potential that we could see a couple of additional veterans eligible for this fee waiver, but we don't know. And it's not something we're tracking, and it's likely a very small dollar amount. But that was the change made here. Questions? Yes.
It's basically aligning our state practices with federal statute.
So it's 2 things. It's making sure, clarifying that no fees really means no fees when they're registering the vehicle, by bringing in those 2 other fees that are in different areas of the law. And then it's aligning the exemption with the federal eligibility for this benefit. Okay. Okay. Okay, the next fee here, this is an example of where we have another fee reduction for these individuals when it comes to, and this is, I'm sorry, section 8. So these are fees for an operator's license or operator's privilege card. Already for non-driver IDs, we provide a reduced fee for individuals who receive SSI or SSDI benefits. And so this would allow those individuals to receive also a reduced fee for their operator's license. For the non-driver ID, it's $10 for an original or renewal and $5 for replacement. This is setting it at $20 for an original or renewal of an operator's license, or $10 for replacement, because an operator's license is $65 and a non-driver ID is $29, so roughly double. And so the committee downstairs settled on these roughly double numbers. Or questions? Okay. Yeah.
So these got increased, but they continue to be.
This is actually a new reduced fee.
Okay.
The DMV proposal was to go with $10 for an original renewal, $5 for replacement. Downstairs, they decided that 20 and 10 made more sense because the driver's license is more expensive otherwise.
So today, if you're on
SSI or SSDI,
either of those,
yeah,
you pay the regular price. So this is a
exactly.
reduction.
Yeah,
And we'll get an idea of the impact.
This has Logan can talk to you about this. This is one of the more significant financial impacts in the bill. So,
And I know we're gonna discuss this more coming up, but this came about primarily as the new FAST system or the new modernization project. The team looks at different statutes and it was trying to get alignment with what we have for the non-driver ID card versus this was flagged as an area that was. And we'll discuss that more as well.
Mhm. Okay.
yeah, that's actually, the commissioner brings up a good point. A lot of the changes in this bill came out of the required reports on changes that were needed to implement the new modern IT system over at DMV. The other piece in here at the bottom of page 11 is again a fee waiver for individuals transitioning out of foster care for the cost of their license. And then same, there's also a fee waiver for the motorcycle endorsement for an individual transitioning out of foster care. So just staying consistent with that. That brings us to learner's permits. So there's a fee waiver in here for the learner's permit for an individual transitioning out of foster care. And again, a waiver of the examination fee, a waiver of the motorcycle learner's permit fee, and again, a waiver for a renewal of the learner's permit or motorcycle learner's permit. And this is all for the individuals transitioning out of foster care. And then DMV had requested this language here that requires a learner's permit or for a motor vehicle shall contain a photograph or image likeness of the individual because of the new IT system. I guess when we enacted that language, we were still where you would carry your license and then a paper learner's permit with it that didn't have a photo.
Is a new discount or updated? I'm sorry.
So the discount for individuals transitioning out of foster care is brand new. That's a new fee waiver.
Okay.
The photograph requirement for the learner's permit is new. Previously, you would only get a photographic learner's permit if you went to a DMV location that was capable of making one. So obviously at this point, we can do that. So this is what happens when you don't touch a law for quite a while.
Buying all those cameras to do this.
Yeah. It's like how we used to, until 2016, we still had language about impounding and seizing buggies in the alcohol law. So so commercial learner's permit. So this is requiring a photograph on the commercial learner's permit too in section 10. And then in section 11, currently we prohibit the masking or deferring of sentence or judgment for traffic law violations for commercial driver's license holders or individuals operating a commercial motor vehicle. There was a little bit of a loophole here that DMV has proposed to close up, where if you were holding a commercial learner's permit, you weren't subject to this. So this puts everyone who's got a commercial driver's license or is trying to get one on the same playing field.
It seemed like last year there was something we did that also sort of closed the loophole to notify the commercial driver's license when there was some other.
Was that our committee or was that our judiciary? So I was just telling.
Yeah, we did something like
Yeah,
that. There was
something.
another loophole
Yeah,
there that, violations wouldn't get reported. I wasn't sure, maybe it was going to the federal government or whatever, but this is a little loophole. If you have a permit,
Right.
then you get the same requirements.
Exactly.
That was the issue. Was that the issue? The family court was not notifying
Yeah,
the DMV
yeah,
of licenses that had been suspended because they were minors.
yeah.
And they so the system wasn't get driving, so they could have kept driving because there was no way for the
That
DMV
was
to know.
judiciary, maybe it was.
Or do we just do the drive-by here in terms of brought it here?
Yeah, I think
Like
that's
it's
what it
what
was.
it's-
Yeah, I think that's what it
Kept it
was.
in their bill.
Yeah.
Is what I thought we did last year, but I was, as I often say, I would have paid closer attention if I'd have known.
But anyways, yeah, just me and probably, yeah, but.
We're on page
Page 16,
16 of
Yeah.
section 11
or on section 12.
of the DMV,
Um,
it's DMV bill.
Yep. So right now there's an option for the examination to be waived in the commissioner's discretion for individuals who hold a license that's in force at the time or within 3 years prior in another jurisdiction. This is adding junior operator's license to that list. So it's just filling in a gap there, because previously it was a chauffeur's license or an operator's license. And so having junior operator's license at the top didn't make sense. If you could only do that if your jurisdiction didn't issue junior operators licenses, you could only get the waiver. So this closes that loop. I guess closes the loophole, or at least makes it consistent. It's not really a loophole.
Representative White?
Could you clarify what a junior operator's license?
Under 18.
Under 18.
Yep.
So does this mean that if a junior operator who has a license in Massachusetts and moves to Vermont doesn't have to get another license?
No, so
Have to
it
get
means that they don't have,
That's-
they can get the examination waived by the commissioner in the commissioner's discretion. So the commissioner, I don't know how that review process goes, but the commissioner can waive that examination requirement. So if you come up from Massachusetts or another state that issues junior operators licenses to Vermont, and you're switching over to a Vermont license, you can have the requirement for an examination waived.
But it has to be by the commissioner.
So one thing that's worth clarifying here is our statutes say commissioner all over the place. Commissioner is code for the department staff under the direction of the commissioner, understanding that the commissioner cannot be everywhere in the state all at once processing these transactions. So oftentimes when it says in the commissioner's discretion, it means the commissioner provides guidance so that staff can apply that discretion on the commissioner's behalf. Same thing when we say the commissioner shall adopt rules, the commissioner will delegate that task to staff who will write the rules. So that's just, yeah, so you don't have to apply to the commissioner personally to get this waiver. But the commissioner can direct how it happens.
Okay, I'm just thinking about other states have different requirements regarding if you can get a junior driver's license. Some require driver's tests, some don't. I'm sure this has all been thought through, but those are concerns that come up in my mind. And now the commissioner wanted to respond.
Yeah, I think what's gonna end up happening is just, we're gonna take a look at the 50 states, identify which ones are acceptable to Vermont standards, and then that way the staff knows if someone moves in.
Yeah.
They can go through that process, and if it's not one of those states, if there's sometimes people that in states that don't have the test also do the driver's ed, so there could be situations. We want that flexibility just to, more case by case. This isn't that, unfortunately, not a huge amount of people coming in, fluxing into the state, so. But it's identifying the states that are acceptable, so that's a clean process, and then kind of outlining case by case for those others, for staff, that kind of flag.
Thank you.
And it's important to note it's a may waive, so it's not a requirement.
Right.
And it gives the commissioner discretion to set up the waiver or to not. So if we got to a point where Vermont felt that its standards were so much higher than the rest of the country, it could simply stop issuing waivers.
Representative Pout?
Two questions. One is waiver of written and a driver's test. Are they both, or is just, what is the examination
So that would be the examination, the written test and driving test,
together?
yeah, together. So it's kind of, you're looking at like a new driver coming in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it'd be the whole process. The only example I can really give real life is, I grew up here in Vermont, moved to Western Massachusetts in high school, had my Vermont license. Massachusetts had a 16.5. So when we moved, I was right at 16. And Massachusetts said I could, because they accepted Vermont's driving standards, I could maintain my license past the 16.5 in Massachusetts, legal down there. So kind of reverse of that. If we're just looking at states and saying we're okay with this junior operator.
Right.
The requirements are met in Rhode Island,
My
Massachusetts.
question is examinations means both.
Yeah.
Both of the written and thing. And then the other one was just on consistency. So you said we would make a list of these states are acceptable. Will you also say and or evidence of driver's ed, or would somebody say, oh, you know, hey, I had driver's ed too, and then make that decision at the, you know,
That would be
right then and
the-
there?
Yeah, so that'd be the expectation. I haven't got that far with the team
Okay.
that handles that side, but that's the expectation is that everyone's got different situations coming in. So we want to be able to pivot and adapt and allow those individuals that do have driver's ed that taken the extra course studies. And as long as those driver ed courses meet what is standard for here in Vermont, then we want to be able to be flexible in that. So it's correct. It's not gonna be like a hard no. It's gonna have an off ramp for people that to be able to display the additional coursework that they've done and if they don't fall within those, say 30 of the 50. Or I don't.
Yeah. I would just want to make sure there's consistency there. It's not up to, you know, whoever you get that day at the, you know, when you're applying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what our intent is, to be consistent across.
Thank you.
Representative McCoy.
Representative White, that's my question.
I'm sorry. Oh, good.
Okay, good. Great. So the next section, section 13, this is the fee for the examination. So this is kind of an interesting section. So this is a scheduling fee that we added to the statute with the caveat, and I'll skip ahead just so you can see it, that the commissioner may waive the fee until the department is capable of administering it electronically. So this was written with an eye towards the DMV modernization. So DMV has not been charging this fee. DMV came in with a proposal to just eliminate the fee altogether. The Senate Finance Committee was concerned about the hit to state revenues when we're capable of administering it. So they added it back in with a note that beginning on or before July 1, 2026. So DMV modernization.
All right.
It's okay.
All right.
Sounds sounds like another round of donuts for the committee.
That was Jones Donut calling.
How come I didn't get them up today?
Thank you for your patience.
But yeah, so DMV had proposed eliminating the fee, which has not been imposed yet. Senate Finance was concerned about the potential hit to state revenues. And so Senate Finance added it back in with the caveat that it need not begin before July 1, 2026, unless DMV can do so. So I believe they're still on track for late November or mid-November. So assuming that works out, they could roll this out as early as November. But if there are hiccups in the rollout, they can delay the rollout here. So this doesn't tie them to a hard and fast date. And then finance added flexibility here. So previously the fee could be waived with 48 hours notice of cancellation. And this added good cause for cancellation. So in other words, you get sick on the morning of the examination, you got the flu, COVID, something like that. And so you call in sick or some other emergency comes up, your car breaks down, something like that. And this is good cause determined by the commissioner. The other piece too, to keep in mind is there are two other pieces, and the department can speak to this more. Right now, the way it works, people are scheduling for a number of spots on the calendar. They're able to block off like 5 appointments. And so what's happening is that they'll pick the one that works best for them and no show for the rest. Once they modernize the system, you'll be stuck with only picking one spot. So that's probably going to reduce this. And as long as you show up, the fee is applied towards your license examination fee. So it's only when you no show that you lose this money. So that's all the caveats there. I'm sure the department can add more input on that. The Senate can talk about what their concerns were. Logan can talk about the money, but that kind of gives you the background on this section, which is, this is probably the most convoluted trail of any section in this bill. So.
Representative McCoy.
Oh, that was the money piece, like do we know approximately how much money would be? How much we gain from this? I mean, but just hearing Damien talk about no shows, I don't know if you can calculate that.
So, we have approximately 3,400 no shows last year, fiscal year. Oh, no, sorry, not fiscal year, calendar year. So I think that was, the fiscal no was over 100,000. So two main points, I know Damien touched on this. When I learned that you can make multiple appointments, we pivoted quickly on this. So as we deploy, the team's already working with, on the programming side for the rollout. You're not gonna be able to make multiple appointments. You're gonna be stuck with one appointment. And I think that's gonna alleviate a lot of the no-shows. Cause I think if I'm 16 years old, I'm gonna go book 5 things. In case I fail the first one, I already lined up for Tuesday. One thing I just made this clear on the Senate side, I don't want to use this as a revenue driver because we're trying to get people in to do the test and having that flexibility to, if someone no shows, that we keep that 29 and we apply it to their next examination fee. I think if you no show, no call, and then don't respond for a couple weeks, I think that's when you're going to see that revenue. I think it's a very small portion that you're going to see. I want to allow the DMV to be customer oriented and able to be flexible with people have busy lives and things come up that we can kind of move that 29 to next testing if they can't show past 48 or and so that's just how we're looking at it.
Okay,
I
so,
think it's more skin in the game for people though. To be fair, I think a lot of people have skin in the game that they are going to show up.
yes, agreed. So, do you think the system can handle, like if I go in and I want to schedule an exam and like, well, let me schedule a second exam. Will the system allow me to do that or just say, no, you already have one scheduled? So you can't.
Yes. So when we convert to the new system
Okay.
in November, yes.
Okay,
The current system. Absolutely.
Okay, so-
That's why we haven't been collecting it.
okay, so November of this year?
Yeah.
It will be allowed, so you're talking January of 2026, this will be online.
Yeah, so we're hoping for a November I go live,
Okay,
just because we're still in session and they're
Okay.
building it right now.
okay,
They said they could do it, but as we know, some things change, so that's why we asked for just a little bit extra to July 1. My expectation though is, as we go live, this will be in November.
okay, great, thank you.
So the employees won't be able to book all the time around their lunch break.
Actually, I just wanted to say, the commissioner there was reminding me that when Senator Chittenden spoke about this on the floor, he emphasized that this wouldn't be generating a lot of revenue based on sort of the revised plan. So even though there were initial concerns about the lost revenue, he was more focused on the accountability issue.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't mischaracterizing. Any members expressed reasons for supporting the amendment. So I'll do the same for you too on the other side, or try to. So next is the the non-real ID operators privilege cards. So you're going to see a lot of changing his or her to the commissioner in here. The real change in here is a compliance with a federal law requirement here that the cards say non-real ID instead of privilege card. So federal law calls it a real ID for that card that you can use to go across the border or get into a federal building. If it does not comply with that, it's supposed to say non-real ID. So this just brings us into compliance with the federal requirements around the real ID program. So any questions? Or, oh, Molly.
Are there any other states that have a driver's privilege card?
Yes, there are. I don't know the number or list off the top of my head, but there are other states like Vermont that have two different driver's license options or operator's license options, one that's real ID compliant and one that's not. And we're about to get to more discussion of that, both with license extensions and providing information to individuals who decide that either cannot provide the documents to get a real ID compliant card or decide that they don't wish to, will be notified of their option to get a privilege card or a non-driver ID. So there, as I think all of you know at this point, when you get a real ID, you have to provide certain proof of citizenship or legal residence in the country, and so forth. And we already allow individuals who cannot provide that or do not provide that documentation to get an operator's privilege card. And so this would just be letting individuals know about that option if they're not already aware. So.
Representative Pouch.
And I guess I don't know. When would you use a non-real ID card?
You would use it as your driver's license.
If you to show your
To
age.
prove your age at a bar or another store around the state. But you couldn't, for example, use it to enter a federal building or a federal facility. You also couldn't use it to travel across the border. So those are the two big limitations. You also can't use it to fly. You need a real ID to go through security at the airport, to go across the border, et cetera. But if you just want a driver's license, that will be good for driving in Vermont and other states across the country, then you're okay. And so that's why we created the operator's privilege card when real IDs came out. Understanding that there are individuals in the state who lack federal authorization to be here, or who choose not to provide that documentation for whatever reason.
So is a real ID, a non-real ID, an operator's license, or can you get an operator's license and because you can get an ID?
You get one or the other. To the best of my knowledge, you're not issuing both, right?
Right, so you can get a as a proposed, a non-real ID driver's license or non-real ID identification card, one or the other. So
Okay, so you can get, all right, that makes sense. In the same way, you can get a real driver's license, an ID driver's license, a real ID driver's license, and a real ID identification card.
Yeah, it gets confusing too because of the language that Congress chose to use for this program, real ID. It makes it sound like anything else is, like a fake ID.
Yeah.
But it is a lowercase real ID,
Okay,
not an uppercase real ID.
thank you.
Yeah.
So a real ID has proof of. Citizenship.
Yeah, it requires that you show proof of citizenship or legal presence in the country. So that could be that you're here on a green card or something else. It could be that you provide them with a US passport. But yeah, if you're here, for example, on a time-limited immigration document, your license gets limited to the length of that immigration document so that you don't have a valid license.
But it's real.
It is, it is uppercase real. Yes.
With the star.
It has the little star in the corner, so.
You have to be a US citizen to get a real.
Exactly.
Driver's ID.
Yep,
You just happen to
exactly.
have that documentation or choose to provide that documentation.
Right.
And the
So-
non-real identification, the only example that we use so far is proof of age. Because I assume that that can be proved to apply for certain state benefits or programs of some sort.
The privilege card.
Yes.
So I'm gonna call it privilege card because I'm tripping up on the real. The privilege card, yeah, you can use that as proof of age at stores. You can use that as when you get, pulled over by a law enforcement officer for speeding, that's the ID you would provide them with. You can use that for anything else that requires an ID that's not federally sort of governed by federal law.
Yes, if there's.
Yeah.
Programs or benefits.
Right, so I think the state would take it. I am not an expert on state benefit
Either.
programs, but my understanding is that there's no problem having that ID and applying. You have to meet the other eligibility requirements, and since many of those are federally regulated, there may be issues if you are not present in the country legally, and I don't know which programs those issues would crop up in.
A non-real or doesn't prove, it doesn't say that you're here illegal or not.
No, it doesn't.
Because you just didn't provide them at the time. It
Right.
doesn't say that you're necessarily here
Right, so,
illegally, or that you're not even, you could have one even if you're a US citizen.
right, as a US citizen, I could choose not to provide the required documentation when I go to get my license and then end up with a privilege card instead of a real ID.
Any thought otherwise would be an assumption as opposed to, it's not a fact that you, okay. It doesn't guarantee that you are or are not. It doesn't.
Right, it has nothing,
Okay.
right. I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with it, but it fundamentally, it doesn't say whether you are or not a citizen. It simply says you didn't provide the documentation required under federal law to get a real ID.
Okay.
And so that's where we're at. And it may be that you just don't have the documentation for whatever reason. So,
There were other hands up. I'm not sure where we lost it. Or I know that Representative White and McCoy and then Couch or vice versa.
Is a Vermont driver's license synonymous with a real ID?
no.
Even though you have to provide your birth
So-
certificate?
Vermont driver's license has two subcategories. The real ID Vermont driver's license and what I'll call the privilege card, which is the quote unquote non-real ID.
So the driver's license is the umbrella, and there's a real ID and a non-real ID version of the driver's license.
Right.
So if I have the real ID version of the driver's license, that is not a real ID? Yes.
No, if you have the real ID version, it is, they're both real IDs, lowercase real.
Okay, okay,
But they both work as a form of ID. The difference is the uppercase real ID,
Mhm.
federally compliant identification, can be used when you travel by plane, crossing the border into Canada and Mexico, at federal facilities, whether it's the federal building in Burlington or other places where you need to provide ID, and for other related sort of federal purposes. And then for everything else that a regular, any other license could be used for. Buying alcohol, buying cigarettes, proving age. What's that? Yeah,
I don't
okay.
understand why a Vermont driver's license is not a real, I mean, if you have to provide your birth certificate and, citizenship.
So there
documentation,
are
it's
other
not
documentation options.
false.
So if you've provided the birth certificate or other documentation to prove you're a US citizen, you pretty much default to the real ID. If you have provided other proof of identity that doesn't demonstrate that you're a citizen or in the country legally, then you would default to the privilege card. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I still don't understand why my Vermont driver's license, where I have provided all that information that a federal real ID requires would not
No, no,
serve as my real ID.
It would.
Oh, it does,
It would.
it does.
Yeah.
Because there's two classes.
Yeah, so there's just two
Are we
classes of
marking them as
license.
such?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Star.
We're gonna-
The star is what,
I
okay.
guess we can say is we're going to get a full education on what we do or don't do. Which is part of the reason we need to understand it before we
Yeah.
make any changes to the, right, that is part of the,
Yeah,
it's part of the plan over here, Matt.
yeah.
If you don't mind me jumping in real quick, not to add more confusion to this. So we actually have
Let's start.
we actually have two different
Okay.
You're all right.
We have the non-real ID, which I'm calling non-real ID. So that is a license you can drive, say, Vermont and other states. You just consider that a land-based license. We have the real ID, which is dictated through the federal government, through DHS. We have our requirements we have to meet. The third one is the enhanced driver's license, and that's the one you can cross the land borders with Canada and Mexico. So not that we're gonna have a whole presentation yet. So
Star is the
real, the flag. So you can
But
have,
it's on my driver's license.
Yeah, you probably have a real ID.
if you have the star and the flag, it's an enhanced driver's license. There's a separate set of
Okay,
rules for that, and we're gonna have a big presentation
Okay.
coming in for that.
okay. I'm gonna defer to the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you for that
Just getting
clarification.
a good hint as to why we're gonna do what we're doing over the next couple of weeks. I think we're over to Representative McCoy and then Representative Pound.
So again, I think the real ID, you had to offer additional things like 2 pieces of mail that had your address on it, your birth certificate and everything, in short of having just a lowercase non-real ID, your privilege card. Traveling, if you have your passport, you can just use your passport. You don't have to have the real ID in order to travel.
For the enhanced driver's license.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all of that language is set out in 23 VSA 608. And you can walk through those requirements. I'm sure that DMV also has that information up on their website. Oh, not 608, I'm sorry. That's the fee. I think it's 601. So,
And I thought that federal law, as far as traveling, you needed a real ID was either May of 24 or May of 25.
they,
May of this year,
May of this
May
year.
7th.
Yeah.
I'm actually in a press conference at the airport.
Okay, that's what I thought.
TSA next week.
Yes, yeah.
sorry, the correct section is 603 that has the application for an issuance of license. It has the information on everything you're required to have for the license to issue for the different types. And that's what we're amending. So it talks about what you would have to provide if you're a citizen of a foreign country, et cetera, or if you're a citizen of the US. And then if you're unable to establish legal residence, it goes through that information that you need to provide, et cetera. So it does not, I don't know that this provides the enhanced driver's license requirements. I think those are set out in federal law. But again, you're going to get a probably much more easily digestible presentation on all of this. So
What was it actually gonna do? Representative Pouch is up next.
So a question, it might be for DMV. How many other states allow non-real ID driver's licenses?
I can find that out for you.
Okay.
Oh, wow, our usage of it, or they have their own?
They have their own, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and or, yeah, I mean, if I had a non-real ID driver's license, and I drove across the country, should I get in trouble in some states?
No.
No. If you're just driving, no.
Yeah, yeah,
If you're
okay.
using it to go through TSA, then
Yes, okay.
yeah, so there is reciprocity across the country for driving and so forth. And there's a whole, we could spend probably 45 minutes talking about all the legal reasons why states do that, but there is reciprocity. So if you get a driver's license in Vermont, regardless of what type it is, you can drive from here to California and back, or anywhere you know, you can do the full perimeter of the country if you want to. Highly recommend it. I haven't done it, but I know someone who has. And I hear it was a very cool trip if you have 3 months to drive the back roads all the way around the country. Anyway, committee road trip next summer.
Yeah, let's just, instead of being here, just.
Yeah.
Somebody propose an amendment to the.
Anyway,
That answers.
But yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have other,
other questions on
remind
that?
me again what you wanted to do with this section. What do we-
Yeah, this is literally the only substantive change in the section is just changing privilege card to non-real ID. I'll pop that up. So, oh, too
The
far.
idea that you'd carry something that says non-real is a little weird. Very good, very government-ish, very.
Yeah.
That would be government, and it's, please continue.
Yeah,
Saving
okay.
myself.
So this was added by the Senate Transportation Committee. And this is related to what Representative Tomlinson was talking about yesterday. So the first piece here is section 604 will basically allow an individual at any time during the term of their license being valid, whether it's a 2-year license or a 4-year license, to renew it. And then you would pay a prorated cost based on the number of whole years remaining on the license. So I have like 1 year and change left on my license. So if I went to early renew now, I would get a 1-year proration off the cost of a new license. I wouldn't get the 6 months or whatever it is remaining beyond that. So that just gives you an idea. You get a prorated license cost. You can renew early. This was, so I think Representative Tomlinson spoke to the reasons for this provision, and it was discussed pretty extensively in the Senate. They had looked at something similar to, oh, I'm drawing a blank.
351?
Yes, 351, Representative Hedrick's bill. They had looked at the 8-year proposal in that bill, which would be extending licenses from 4 to 8, which is the maximum length you can have under the Real ID law, which has created so many headaches this morning. But this would just switch that to early renewal, and we can talk about the reasons more. Part of it had to do with smoothing out the revenue flow for that. Because as you could imagine with 8-year licenses, if everyone switched over, you'd have a spike and then a big spike and then a big spike. And with at least the early renewal, you sort of stay on the same sort of ebb and flow that we have with 2- and 4-year licenses. But then we can discuss that. But this would basically say, at any point you could do that, and the department will look at the requirements for documentation. So if you need a new photo or something like that, they'll just do that at the time of early renewal.
So, my birthday's in January, so if I renew in December, is the license going to expire on my birthday and not in December? So I renew early technically. How does that work?
So you would maintain your birth date
As
as,
the expiration
Yeah.
date? Okay. Is there an additional fee for like renewing a month early? Because
no, so
technically,
currently right now, I believe it's 60 days, you already can
okay,
prior, so that's kind of covered now. This is just kind of extending that, I guess, back 1 year.
so you can renew, so this is allowing you to renew up to 1 year earlier, so why would one want to do
No,
that?
you could renew up to 3 years earlier.
Why would you want to renew up to 3 years early?
The-
That's what I was trying
Well,
to,
we're not supposed to do that, but
talk about the.
no, we just aren't supposed to. I'm okay, if everybody else is okay with it, I'm okay with it in this case, but when we have the witness, we're generally going this way.
Okay,
We should
let's
ask them to answer
I
it,
can-
but I'm okay if everybody else is okay with having Representative Tom.
I'll ask.
You don't have to comment if you don't want to.
No, I'll
The-
ask.
And it is a little bit out of the.
Yeah.
out of the-
Yeah.
I can speak about what the Senate's concerns were.
But it's not.
So I can't speak for Representative Tomlinson. The Senate, this was in response to concerns from the LGBTQ community, particularly individuals who have a non-binary gender designation on their ID. There is talk that the federal law will change to permit only male or female. And so there were requests to allow for renewal so that they could get their designation on there and then have a license that's valid. So Vermont, with our privilege cards, does not have to follow the federal gender designation rules if those change, but this would allow you to get a real ID, say this year, before anything changes, and then have it valid for 4 years, and then see what happens at the federal level during that time.
Okay.
So that is, as I understand it, those were the expressed intentions at the Senate. There may be other reasons that I'm not aware of. And there were certainly, they heard testimony from a variety of witnesses in the Senate, sort of discussing the issue and also the reason why they proposed 8 years rather than just an early renewal, which is where the Senate settled. So Section 16 does the same thing for non-driver identification cards. Yeah, same exact thing.
If you want to ask any clarifying questions in case we didn't cover anything.
That's okay, thanks. I'll hold up.
Okay, yeah. And then I spoke about this, these two sections earlier. So 17 states that the intent of the General Assembly is to ensure that any individual who is unable to or does not wish to comply with requirements of the Real ID Act be informed of the option for obtaining a privilege card or non-driver ID, which only have to comply with state law. And then Section 18 is an outreach to inform individuals regarding their rights to obtain an operator's license, privilege card, or non-driver ID, and the right to self-attest with respect to the gender marker on their license, privilege card, or non-driver ID, and reduced fees that are available to individuals who meet certain requirements. And so this kind of captures not only the updates with the early renewal and the concerns around gender markers on IDs, but also the reduced fees that are added by this bill for individuals on SSI, SSDI, and certain veterans who may not have qualified for reduced fees previously.
So
Or may not have.
15, 16, 17, and 18 all reached together, all
They are all clumped together. So, yep,
one, all new, it's all new.
it's all new. And this was all proposed by the Senate Transportation Committee.
Okay, 15, 16, 17,
Uh,
18 are all together and all.
Is everyone hanging in there with me at this point? We've been going for an
Gonna
hour and 20 minutes, so we're gonna
bring
come
members
through.
suggested a little bit of break if that depends, or I'm not exactly sure where your schedule is at. If you
I'm with you guys for the morning, so I can go till noon if you want to.
want 5 minutes? Okay, we'll adjourn for 5. We'll extend it, make sure we're started back up by 11. The 5 will become 8 and we'll start back up by 11.